Hi, I'm Christiana Gaudet, and I'm here with more answers to your questions about tarot. Today's question comes from Steve. He says, I work as a counselor for LGBT communities, and I'm currently starting my own business as a tarot reader, specializing in reading for LGBT communities. I'm really interested to know which cards you feel resonate with people experiencing discrimination, and which cards are particularly relevant to people exploring their sexuality or gender identity. That's a great question, and I wish you so much luck with your business. And you know, the thing is, I think this is something that every tarot reader needs to consider, because whether or not we make it a point to read for people in the LGBT community, let's face it, we're all going to, and we all need to be able to respond to the needs of all our clients. Now, you know, when we ask the question, which cards are particularly resonant or relevant, really all 78 of them. We could look at every single one of the 78 cards and see how that might have a message of someone struggling with their identity, or someone dealing with a situation specific to the gay experience, or someone dealing with discrimination. But let me share with you a few things that I've found to be true throughout the years. And I have to say this too. You know, I had a very lucky break early on in my career. Well, a series of lucky breaks. You know, maybe it was luck, maybe it was witchcraft, who knows. But anyway, one of the things that manifested for me was the opportunity to do a regular gig in a gay bar. And I'll tell you what, I learned so much about, exactly the question that you asked. How do the cards specifically come up for members of the LGBT community? And let's start by looking at the court cards. I think the court cards are very significant because they're people and they talk specifically about gender. Typically, we think of pages as being more feminine, knights being more masculine, queens being feminine, kings being masculine. And, you know, it would be a wonderful tarot world if gay men showed up as queens reliably. In my practice, they don't. More's the pity. But I can tell you a few things. People who are struggling with their identity, sexual or otherwise, will have a lot of court cards show up. So when you see a whole bunch of court cards, you may begin to wonder if there is some kind of identity question, and perhaps it might be sexual or gender related. Another thing is when you see a lot of male court cards or a lot of female court cards, that can mean something both in terms of who the person's attracted to or who the person identifies with. Now, here's an interesting story. I was doing a phone reading for a woman who had booked with me. I didn't know anything about her background. And when I did her opening spread, what was prominent were queens, lots and lots of queens, and the Empress and the High Priestess, all of these very feminine cards. And that was like the whole spread, all of these women. And I know I'm reading for a woman, and I'm thinking, okay, what's going on here? And it didn't seem like this was a lesbian with a lot of dating prospects. You know, that might have been a thing. But I wasn't quite feeling that. I was really drawn to the High Priestess, and I was really feeling this sort of sacred sense of femininity. Perhaps she was Wiccan. Perhaps she was studying the sacred feminine. So I said, you know, this may sound funny, but the most important thing that shows up here right now is simply about being a woman. Whether that is honoring yourself as a woman, whether that is somehow pursuing women's studies or women's spirituality, however that shows up for you, the important thing is simply about honoring yourself as a woman and being a woman. And what a weird way to start a reading, right? Well, it turns out that the client I was reading for was in the process of transitioning male to female. And so the idea that the most important thing for her was that she embrace her femininity, that she embrace her womanhood. Well, you know, how perfect is tarot? So there's an example, certainly. And like all tarot reading, I mean, I had no idea what I was dealing with in that situation. It was just a phone reading like any other phone reading. And I think the key is just letting the cards speak. And in this case, the cards very much spoke about gender, and that was what it was about. Now, some other cards that might come up around these issues, you know, when we talk about questioning, you know, there are all the cards of questioning, the Two of Wands, the Seven of Cups, perhaps, you know, and when we talk about bisexuality, being open to all genders, well, we might see the Wheel of Fortune, we might see Temperance there, perhaps. When we talk about the exploration, the questioning, that place of figuring out who we really are, well, there's the Fool and there's the Moon. And the Moon is a little bit the darker side of that questioning, I think, the place where we really may feel lost or may not understand who we are. With the Fool, I think it's more exploratory, it's more fun. Now, when we talk about sex and sexuality, there are so many cards that talk about that in general. And of course, the aces, with the Ace of Wands and the Ace of Swords being masculine, the Ace of Cups and the Ace of Pentacles being feminine, there's a lot of gender play in there too. And of course, the Ace of Wands reversed for me is about a lack of attraction, especially where a man is concerned, or maybe even erectile dysfunction. Other aspects of sexuality, you know, the High Priestess, and I told you about the High Priestess in that one situation, but the High Priestess typically was a card of virginity. And, you know, reversed, Eden Gray called the High Priestess a woman of low virtue. It's the slut card. And so, you know, when people are questioning their sexuality or when they're experiencing discrimination about their sexuality, when there's shaming going on, when we feel shame, for me, the card of shame, you know, specifically sex shame, but other kinds of guilt too, the High Priestess reversed. You know, and in there we might see the Seven of Swords as well. Maybe we would see the Devil somewhere in there too. The Devil might come up as far as discrimination is concerned too, when we look at how other people might be viewing our client. And, you know, a number one card for discrimination, unfortunately, is the Hierophant. You know, when people get real judgmental and real dogmatic, so often the Hierophant is in play. Just a couple of other interesting cards. You know, when people find their true sense of self, of who they are, sometimes that shows up as the Six of Cups, remembering who you always were. Maybe it shows up as the Nine of Pentacles, being secure and comfortable in yourself. And, you know, I just wanted to point out a couple of other major arcana cards that might be significant in this regard. The Star. The Star, one of the meanings, not the only, but one of the meanings from the Star for me is great sex, sexual attraction, sexual energy. That's a big deal in this card. And of course, it's reversed. Well, that could mean something too. You know, maybe there's some lesbian bed death going on there. Or maybe you would see lesbian bed death with the Four of Swords, perhaps. And I would just point out that traditionally, you know, we see the world as a woman, but traditionally the world was a hermaphrodite. You know, the cloth is covering the lower bits so we can't tell what's there. But apparently, by tradition, we know what's there, and it's not what was expected. And, you know, it's just important to note that as well. when we talk about issues of gender and sexuality. Steve, I want to thank you for a great question. I wish you so much luck with your business. And anyone, if you have a question about tarot, send me an email.